welcome to Tuesday Talks with Adrienne Miller. I'm Adrienne Miller. I am the President CEO of Women for Sobriety, and this is Tuesday Talks, our Facebook Live series. I come on every other week, and I've been starting off with the statements, kind of an introduction to the statements of the New Life program. So today we are talking about statement number 9. Like all statements, I feel like I start this every week. I love this statement, and I really do love this statement. So this statement, as it currently stands, is the past is gone forever. No longer am I victimized by the past. I am a new person. I'm a new woman. Sorry. There's my history coming in. So history of this statement. It was originally published, the statement itself has not changed. So originally published in 1976 as The Past Is Gone Forever, and no changes to it. I did find the first publishing in the thought action, which is that second part that's italicized. It was, no longer will I be victimized by the past. Today I am a new person. And I thought that was interesting because I'd never seen the today in there before. Didn't get a chance to dive into it too deep, but I did notice that by 1988, the today was removed. So I'd have to dig into those a little bit closer to see exactly when that today was removed. But when I joined the program, it was no longer will I be victimized by the past. I am a new person. In 2017, when we tweaked some of the statements to kind of get tense to match and just make it a little more consistent, we changed it to no longer am I victimized by the past, rather than will be, no longer will I be victimized by the past, just to kind of change it into a more present focused statement. And then we changed that last word to woman rather than person, just to be more consistent with the other statements and how they all refer to women versus people. So there's your history of statement 9. This is one of the, I would say, one of the more misunderstood statements, or can be very challenging for some people. And I was thinking about my own interactions with this statement early on, and how I interacted with it early on. And I think, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people in addiction are really stuck in the past. And if you think about kind of the folk knowledge that, people's emotional development kind of stops when they get into drinking or drugging, which makes a lot of sense, right? You're not learning a lot of new coping skills. You're not really expanding yourself much. So your emotional development just kind of stops when you start using heavily. Makes sense that we would be kind of stuck in the past. And I was thinking about how when I was 30 and first getting sober, for many years, a lot of my life had been defined by my past. And a big part of that was my mom passed away. She had HIV and AIDS in the 1980s and 1990s, and she passed away in 1996. And that was a huge part of my adolescence. And I was 18 years old when she passed away. And so that was just a huge part of my identity, right? Because a lot of our identity formation comes in when we're teenagers. And so a huge part of my identity had kind of formed around this this trauma that I went through, this very prolonged trauma, because it was quite a long process. And in my early 20s, like, you could not talk to me for more than 5 minutes without learning. Somehow I would work it into the conversation. Oh, and my mom died of AIDS. And it was just such a big part of me. And so I was really victimized by that. And I really started using heavily before she even passed away. And so I feel like my emotional development was just really trapped in the past. And my grieving never happened because, of course, I was using heavily by the time she passed away. And so my emotional development and grief development had completely stunted. So when I got sober at 30, even though I'm reading this, the past is gone forever, I had a lot of unprocessed trauma and a lot of unprocessed grief. And I was having flashbacks to some of the more horrific experiences around her illness. And it really didn't feel like the past was gone. It felt like the past was right there with me. And I think that this is one of the hardest things for people when they're thinking about this statement is it can be really difficult to let go of the parts of our past that really define us. And we really can't, right? It's the fact that my adolescence was spent in the AIDS community really affected who I am, my belief in self-help, peer support. I mean, that was a huge component of my mom's journey. And I wouldn't give that up. That's an important part of my past, and it's something that I value. So I'm never going to be able to be past that. That's always going to be a part of who I am. For me, the key to statement 9 is where do I live today? Right? So that happened. It would come back in intrusive thoughts. We'll talk a little bit about how to work through that later on. But the key to this is like it's I can't change the past, and I shouldn't be living there. I shouldn't be using my past to completely define me and not allowing myself to practice that emotional spiritual growth that's going to get me past whatever happened to me. And the thought action for this statement, I think, is really key. No longer am I victimized by the past. And we all know people who consistently re victimize themselves over and over again by their past. And it's a very classic trauma response to recreate a traumatic experience to try and get a better result. Um, I'm sure there's tons of psychology books written about that. And in a way, we're attempting to resolve it, but really what we're doing is re-victimizing ourselves over and over again. And so this statement is really designed to help us release some of that. And the real goal of this statement, too, is to help us release ourselves from the guilt of our addiction. Because women, especially, a lot of studies show we have a lot more guilt and shame about our behavior, shame especially. Men tend to experience guilt. I did a bad thing. Women tend more to experience shame. I am a bad thing. And so if we're stuck in our past, we're going to continue to think that we are a bad thing. Whereas if we can release that, then we can start to separate ourselves, right, from drinking or using us from sober us, which are two different things. And if you don't think you are a different person when you're using, you're probably not looking very objectively at your behavior, because we use because it turns us into someone we like better most frequently. Um, so so that's a little bit about statement 9, and I think where a lot of people have hangups. And what about the good stuff from your past, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but you don't want to live there either because that's also done. And if you're living in the good memories from your past, you're not creating new good memories. And right, remember the fundamental object of life is emotional and spiritual growth. And so whether you're living in a positive past or a negative past, you're not moving forward into new growth. So what are some pragmatic tips and tricks to let go of the past? I just happen to have a few notes here. So my number one tip on my list is to separate the sober you from the using you, and to really learn to recognize that addiction and substances cause very real chemical changes in the brain. And what we do when we're under the influence is, a lot of people say, oh, your true self comes out. Well, no, because my true self does not steal construction road signs, right? My drunken self steals construction road signs. my sober self returns them in the morning. Um, Not that that ever happened to me. Uh, but really learning that, yes, the things that you did when you were under the influence and in your addiction, that's a different you. Some of it's the same, some of it is this weird derangement that's caused by all these biochemical changes from being in addiction and under the influence. So really learning to spot those differences and to separate yourself a little bit from the you that did those not so proud of things, really important. Um, Early on, I used mantra quite a bit. So when things come up about the past in your mind, I would say something like, you know, I'm sober now, right? Bring it back to where I am now. So remembering the road sign and thinking, uh, I'm sober now. Like I'm doing better now. And it helped me release that. And eventually the thing about mantras is that they start to become automatic. So when those intrusive thoughts about the past would come up, I could just kind of cut them off very quickly and automatically with I'm sober now. Um, Visualization, we talk a lot about meditation in the program, and visualization is a really good way to get in your mind what you want. And so taking some time in some of your morning meditations to create a really rich, textured image of who your sober person is. Because a lot of us don't come to recovery really knowing what a sober us looks like. um, it's not something we may have experienced for a very long time, if ever. Um, so really spending time, who is that person? What do they do? How do they interact with people? How do they dress? How do they look? How do they feel? How do they wake up in the morning? What do they do at night? What's their routines, right? What does a really healthy new you look like? And once you have that kind of image in your mind, then that gives you something to work towards. And of course, if we're working towards something, it's a lot harder to fall backwards and to get stuck in the past. Um, we talk a lot about forgiveness. In a lot of self-help kinds of programs, and I do think forgiveness is really important. Once you start to understand some of the biochemical changes that come into play during addiction, you can really start to forgive that part of yourself. And if you treat yourself with compassion for maybe some of the pain that you are medicating with your substance, um, maybe that compassion can lead to a little bit of self forgiveness and forgiving others when you're ready or if you're able to. Now, the big thing that I alluded to earlier is at some point we do want to look at our past and learn some lessons. Our past, it comes up because it has something to teach us. It probably has some kind of relevance to the moment. If it just randomly comes up, that may be telling you something. It may be telling you that you have something to process about the past. Now, Dr. Kirkpatrick, our program founder, she wrote a lot about how, like, first 3 to 6 months of sobriety, you just need to practice letting go of the past. And I really took that to heart, and it made my sobriety, my very early sobriety, much easier, right? When you're still in that kind of chemical stew and getting that initial recovery going, not a good time to like dig up the trauma with, drunken grandma or whatever. It's probably going to overwhelm you, and it's probably going to lead to a using episode. But at some point, you are going to want to go back and look at the past, especially as it starts to come up in healthy ways in your life, or in intrusive ways. Once you've learned to kind of release it, you'll notice it. You'll notice patterns. So we highly recommend that you get some help for that. Self-help is great, Mutual aid is great. Our friends, my sisters who have walked this path with me are fantastic. They are not trained counselors. If they are, they shouldn't be when they're supporting me as a peer, right? Even if they're a trained counselor. You want to be paying the person that's helping you unpack your past. You need that professional removal. They need that professional removal, and you really want someone who's trained, especially if you have trauma. You really want someone who really knows what they're doing and is going to make sure that you have the tools first to keep yourself safe, as you start to awaken some of that pain, because probably a lot of that pain is why you were using. So, yes, at some point you will need to look at your past, wait till you're stable, and then do it with someone who really knows what they're doing, especially if you have complex trauma or, you know, pretty severe childhood trauma. You definitely don't want to be doing that yourself, and you don't want to just be doing that with your group members. So, there we go. A little longer than usual, but this is such a yummy statement, and there's so much to it that I just couldn't stop. So, thank you so much for tuning in. I invite you. Last week, our Tuesday talk got canceled because the person, I think, got called into work or something. So we need a list. We need a list of women who are willing to do their personal story. We have a list of self-interview questions. They're super easy. You can answer what you want. You can skip what you don't want. You just come on here. We have written instructions on how to go live, how to end it. If you really hate it afterwards, you can delete it and we'll pretend we never saw it, because we keep secrets like that. So please think about contacting Judith, or you can contact me and I will get you in touch with Judith, who is coordinating all these. And I will be back in 2 weeks to talk about number 10, All Love Given Returns. And thank you so much. And everyone have a good holiday season, whatever holiday you celebrate, and a very happy new year. Sober happy new year. All right. Bye, everyone.